Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pop Goes the Stack, the emerging tech podcast that pulls no punches and reads all the patch notes. I am Lori MacVittie, and no buzzwords were harmed in the making of this episode. Yet. So today we wanted to talk about agents and APIs. And we're doing this because there was a paper, and I'm going to have to read the title because it's very long. You know how those academic papers get, right? AI agentic workflows and enterprise APIs, adapting API architectures for the age of AI agents. It's actually very descriptive, and it describes exactly what the title, says it describes, which is, hey, APIs, agents, stop, we have a problem. So what the paper posits is that agents, AI agents in specifically, are a new class of caller of APIs. They're not humans, they're not software, they're something in between, a strange mix. And that existing enterprise APIs were written for specific, known, understood users and traffic. And therefore, ergo and thusly, APIs have to change because problems. And then they enumerate all of the problems. So to expand on the problems, at least a few of them, and dig a little deeper, Connor Hicks, welcome. I'm really excited you're here.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. This is a topic that comes up in my daily work all the time, so it's something I've had to contend with all sorts of different ways.
He dreams in APIs, people. He does.
That's
He
right.
dreams in APIs. And I know we're missing Joel. He's off on a fine tuning run, getting a lot of information so that, he can come back and astound us with his new knowledge. So he'll be back soon. So you'll just have to suffer through me. So I'll kick it off, right? AI agents are a different class of caller. And if we were to be honest with APIs, um, it, mobile changed it, web changed it, integration changed it. These are all slightly different variations on the same thing. But the core premise in all of those APIs has always been it's very predictable. We know what the traffic looks like. We know what the traffic coming out is supposed to look like. So it's very predictable. And when we move to AI and agents specifically, that goes out the window, right? So, yes, they are a new class. What do you think about that?
I absolutely. I've found up at least 5 or 10 different real world scenarios just working with our customers where they have showed me a graph, said this is what our data access patterns looked like a year ago, and here's what they look like today, and the graphs are completely different. You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing where if you allow something that resembles an intelligent something to go run amok in your cloud system or run amok in your data system, you get not just different, but also like completely unexpected patterns that emerge. And sometimes not even patterns at all. Sometimes there's an aspect of randomness to it that you just have to accept because these things are not fixed. They are not predictable. They are changeable. They are not deterministic. And our APIs are not designed for that world.
They're not. Well, that's the premise of the paper. And I would agree. I mean, there's all sorts of different concerns about it, right? Stateless versus stateful, the authentication methods, a lot of the security around APIs today, and how we deal with that is not sufficient for AI, is it?
Yeah, that's right. So there's always going to be an authentication and authorization problem in the work that we do, but agents just amplify it by at least a twofold, if not tenfold, because some agents are acting completely autonomously. Other agents have been triggered on behalf of a human. Others are part of a third party system that we don't even control that are just pecking at us, trying to access our data and our context and perform actions that we may or may not have intended them to perform. So, you know, the traditional security controls, the traditional observability, and the traditional kind of best practices around least privilege, and all of these things need to be reconsidered when you have these things that aren't quite a person, but also not quite a predictable, Python script that does the same thing every time you execute it.
Yeah, Python's, yeah, scripts are very, they're constrained, right? Same thing with most software. They're very constrained by the code. There are a fixed set of actions that they can take, and we know which ones they are. And those are further constrained by authentication and authorization and access rights. And one of the things we miss is, yes, an agent might be stopped from accessing a system because it says, "Hey, you're not authorized." But this starts to feel a little bit like, TCP retransmit storms. Like, "Oh, I couldn't get through there. Let me try something else. Let me try something else." So then you get a storm of traffic, and it just can overwhelm the network. So that's also a problem for enterprises in the way that we authenticate and authorize access to APIs.
Yeah, and then there's, the actual access patterns themselves, right? The way that an agent goes about completing a task is itself non-deterministic. You could ask it to perform the same task 3 times in 3 different days, and it might actually go about doing it completely differently. So the order in which it gathers the context it needs, accesses the lists of tools that it has available, and then actually goes and executes its plan, it is non-deterministic. And so you have to be able to contend with, can my APIs handle the load? Can the access layers actually cooperate amongst each other to make sure that this thing is only accessing and performing actions that it is allowed to do? And if something goes wrong, which it will, can I reliably determine what went wrong and where? And can I then actually effectively correct it? Because that's actually not even a given.
That's, yes, very, very true. Is the answer then rewrite your APIs, change them, just do it differently? What does that mean? We have APIs, we know, right? They're REST for the most part. We understand that it's not necessarily a standard, but everybody follows the same kind of best practices around CRUD, which is a whole nother discussion, right? APIs today are written for CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete. And agents actually need things like, run, query, execute, right? They need a host of different types of actions that HTTP and APIs just don't support. So that's a different issue there.
Absolutely. Yeah. If it was me, you would add an E on the end of that cruddy. They sometimes want to be able to, write a Python script and then execute that Python script, because that's sometimes how agents solve a problem, right? And so there's all these kinds of new paradigms. So do you need to rewrite or rebuild or redesign your APIs? I think that it is inevitable, but also the reality of the world is that not everybody's capable of doing that all at once. And so is there a middle ground? Or does it have to be all or nothing into this new agentic world? That's not an answer that I have, or rather, that's not a question that I have the answer to. But I think there has to be some kind of change, because what we have now is not going to work.
And I think you just like hit on the it legacy versus modern apps. Didn't we have this discussion about applications like 20 years ago? Oh,
Yep,
we can't upgrade everything. We can't make it all modern, so we have to figure out how to glue these together. And it looks like what AI is doing is creating that moment again for APIs and all of the things that came before it. Just draw a line and say, okay, everything behind here is not going to work the same, so we have to figure out some glue.
that's
Now,
right.
we didn't talk about this before show, right? And prep you for it, so this is coming out of left field, but I have heard people positing that MCP as a wrapper around existing APIs and then using tool restrictions would help with both authentication, authorization, scaling out the APIs, and some of the access problems, thereby kind of making the traffic, if not predictable, at least a little less chaotic.
That's right. I see MCP kind of like a choke point in the agentic workflow. It is a if not predictable, at least understandable subset of what agents want to do, right? They might want to be able to do more than what MCP allows, but at least MCP gives them a window into our existing APIs that they can understand the agents and we can control because it's a set of messages and access controls that at least we can reason about and exert some control over. Now, MCP doesn't actually define a built-in auth and auth C strategy. So there's a bit of a wild west going on in that regard. And there is the delegated identity problem wherein some agents are acting completely autonomously, but others are acting on behalf of a human. So the question becomes, if I trigger an agent to do something, does that agent assume my identity and all of my access versus an agent that is running, maybe as a nightly or weekly job? Does it have a completely different method of authenticating and authorizing itself within these systems? These are all questions that nobody has one single answer to. Lots of people have ideas, but there's no one single standard that everyone's agreed on yet.
Well, that it's too early for that, and it like it's moving too fast. So the best practices are kind of emerging out of many, many mistakes and missteps. We find the right answer, and that's always been true. I think it's just mostly been, behind the scenes. And this is really out in the open between like open source and this, build in the open and everybody, share everything. It's kind of changed that environment. So now we see the mistakes and we can all adapt in real time. And we almost have to because the AI is just it's moving so fast, at least with
Yeah.
adoption, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really liked about the paper is that it related agents to GraphQL a couple of times. Now,
Mm.
GraphQL, love it or hate it, you can have all sorts of opinions about GraphQL, but there is a lot of conceptual similarities with what we need to do here. GraphQL gave you a set of standardized, APIs and data structures and whatever else to access a whole myriad of different backend data stores and then do rewrites against it. And agents need to be able to do the same thing, but in a less structured and more flexible way, I suppose. And GraphQL had the problem of, hey, if I'm going and running queries across 10 different disparate systems in order to come up with a final, result, that can be inefficient. There's really ways that you can mess that up, and you can have these cascading system interaction failures that come along with that by simplifying it in this way. But agents need to be able to do that. They need to be able to query multiple backend systems and data stores. They need to be able to formulate responses and come up with execution plans, and then they need to be able to take action using tools or some other method. And so there are a lot of similarities to GraphQL, and so the paper posits this need for an AQL, an agent query language. And do I think that's a great idea?
Hmm.
Maybe, but is it going to be something that we can, reason about and implement as humans? I think we could. And then the question is, do we go down a lot of the same problems that GraphQL had? Or have we learned our lesson? Could we maybe architect it a bit differently? Use, the lessons we've learned from MCP, use the lessons that we're learning from the A2A protocol and come up with kind of this new generation of query language? I think that would be very interesting, but it would take a industry-wide effort to make that, a reality.
Well, and that won't happen, right? It's just I mean, very very infrequently do we see that kind of HTTP is probably one that everybody they got behind. Just like once TCP won, everybody embraced it. Went yes, we're going that way until till they started to go maybe there's other options, and then we started seeing some interesting things happen. So it's
Right.
complete standards probably not going to happen, but convergence on a set of best practices for the enterprise often happens. We saw that with APIs. Like we said, there's no standard, there's no specification for here's how to write an API, but there is consensus around best practices and approaches that enterprises have adopted, and then that kind of becomes the de facto standard. So I think we'll see the same kind of thing. We see that with MCP right now.
Yeah.
It's going to be the thing. Now, is it in its final form? Probably not, right? But
No.
it's a good start, and everyone seems to go, this is a good base to build on, so let's go with it. So that's good, because what I'm hearing is maybe we don't have to rewrite all of our APIs, but maybe we have to start supporting the tools that will leverage those APIs, like MCP, or what other protocols are coming up. Even maybe it is GraphQL. Maybe we do, integrate that and use that. Or do you think we should rewrite everything?
I am not usually the one recommending that you rewrite everything. It's never going to be the answer, because as soon as you're done rewriting it, some new shiny thing will come along. So I totally agree that best practices are usually the way to go. I think in the end, we are going to have, something along the lines of React, where React in itself is a core set of components and style of SDK and style of APIs in order to interact with a lower level set of browser capabilities. But then there's a whole ecosystem of things that have popped up around React that extend it or make it easier to develop with or connect it to other systems. I think and I hope that we will see something similar come up around agents and generative AI that gives you a solid foundation to build upon, and then a community or an ecosystem of related and interconnected tools will pop up around it. And being able to choose, how do I do my auth and auth C? How do I do my rate limiting? How do I do my tool selection and all of this kind of stuff? These will all be pluggable and interconnected units that you can choose from so that you can achieve the goals that your particular team or your particular product or whatever it is needs.
I like that approach. And it also makes it easier. I shouldn't say better, but easier for the industry to develop solutions around things like security, because API security as it exists today is not enough to deal with this. Context and semantic, right? Issues notwithstanding, right? There's just, between stateful state, the whole mess is just not enough. It's a good start, it's a good foundation, but we need more in order to secure that traffic from the agents or just Gen AI apps in general. So starting with something and then building on that is a lot easier once you have consensus around, this is how we're going to build it. Here's the kind of traffic that you can expect to see, even if you can't predict where it's going. And then you can build solutions that are better at securing it, directing it, steering it, all of the things that delivery and security lives to provide. So I
Yeah.
think that's a good step. I like that.
Absolutely. We jokingly call it layer 8, right? We think it
Yeah.
goes beyond layer 7 in the OSI stack. Call it the semantic layer or the agentic layer or whatever you want to call it. But we do believe that there's a paradigm here that is so fundamental to the next whatever decades of software that it deserves its own layer of the OSI stack.
Okay, now we have harmed a buzzword. So I hope everyone is happy. We've said paradigm shift. I think that gets counted somewhere. Connor, I'm
Yeah,
just saying we
I know.
we keep
I
track of
know.
that. So, but it is true. It is different. A lot of things have been called layer 8 in the past. APIs, the business, people. Now it's semantic, and that's been brought up before in the context of the semantic web. Web 3 was all about semantics, right? The
Right.
semantic web. So this is not a new concept, and it's kind of an evolution. So whether it's layer 8 or it's some other term, it definitely is a thing shift. I can't say it because I'll be
I
on a
know.
list. Yeah.
I know.
So
I know. I know.
so we're almost at time, and now is when we like to, what are the three things you should take away? Hopefully we
Yeah.
were clear enough, but in case we weren't, like, what's the three things an enterprise should take away from this paper, from this discussion?
I think the first thing would be, use the learnings of all of your compatriots in the industry to start coalescing around some kind of best practice for, most importantly, access and security. And if you can lay a great foundation for that, then everything else on top of it becomes easier and less fraught with peril. The second thing would be, don't rush to go and rewrite everything to run some agentic stack. You don't need to go and rip everything out and replace it with, I'm going to only write MCP servers from here until the end of time. That's, I don't think, going to be useful to anybody. And then the third is prepare your design thinking and your systems thinking for this non-deterministic future. We have to be prepared to put the guardrails and put the access control and the observability in place to be able to contend with non-determinism and not let it overrun our applications and ruin all the hard work that we put into reliability and security and all the things that make enterprise software tick.
Awesome. Awesome. I think I'd echo those, right? Agents are a new kind of caller, and they do create chaos in your environment. Don't rewrite your APIs yet. They're going to have to coexist just as legacy and modern had to coexist for the last, 20, 30. Okay, for a long time, they've had to coexist. So you don't need to, there are, other options, other ways to approach it. Right. And three, I just, be ready for that security side, right? The access and how you're going to view it. And, perhaps consider what that model is. Is it on behalf of users? Does that matter? Does it not? Ultimately, organizations have to set a standard around that for their environment, their applications, their business, and then be able to implement it. So don't rush out and get rid of your APIs just yet. They're still useful.
That's right.
So awesome. Well, thank you very much, Connor. That is a wrap for Pop Goes the Stack. If we spared your brain cells, subscribe. If not, file a ticket. We'll triage the sarcasm later.
I'm sure I'll access that Jira ticket sometime.
Awesome.